Alright, we got two more reaction videos to go, and then that's it. So this time, we're gonna react into what happened when we died. Part one is the Pinter's Mysterious School. It's by Pinter's Preaches. Yeah, sorry if I say anything wrong. I apologize. I don't know what's been going on, but yes. But in case you didn't know this, in case you never recognized her, she is she's from San Jacoby, like last time, of course, because she has an amazing priestess, sorry, and she helps San Jacoby, you know, not letting them get possessed or something like that, because I just hope it doesn't happen to me while I'm doing this, a paranormal investigation, if I ever does so, because I was actually, still planning on doing that, because I have to make sure that most of these are not very dangerous as it is, because I am get very worried about the whole, the things about, you know, what happens if we die, or I die, of course, and it actually worries me, and of course, in case you notice, she's not a Wiccan. She's actually a Kosas. The Okosas. Is that how you pronounce it? My apologies if I say it wrong. If I say it wrong, I apologize. That's my. I'm a very I'm a very worse person, if you ask me. It's a lot of things to it, so yeah, I apologize for that. But in case you notice, she actually, she also do like the whole, one of those, the tar card with, what, she'll told you, was gonna, happen of, like near future and all, and it reminds me of, I don't know. It reminds me like what's that called? One of those magic bomb things. I forgot what it's called. But let me know comment below if I can't forget. But I don't wanna keep y'all waiting. But I'm sorry. But we'll probably react more. Essential preachers. Hopefully, but hopefully next time. But yeah, so comment down below, and yeah, let's check it out in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello, Seekers. This lesson is focused on the soul's transition after the physical body dies. In the Western world, we call this death. This is part 1 of 2 on life after death. Today, I will be discussing the process of death, soul slumber, and the astral planes. Death is a natural process. It is the soul's transition from life on the physical plane to life on the astral plane. All the information I'm presenting today comes from Yoga Ramachakara's book, Life Beyond Death, written in 1912. Yogi Ramachakara was a pseudonym of William Walker Atkinson, an American writer who was influential during the turn of the century, the 1890s to the 1900s, spiritual and philosophical movements such as New Thought and Theosophy. Ultimately, Atkinson released more than a dozen titles under this pseudonym. The Ramachakara books were published by the Yogi Publication Society in Chicago and reached more of an audience than Atkinson's New Thought works did. In fact, all of his books on yoga are still in print today and are widely respected, although some of his work is dated in some respects. And there is obviously some problematic issues with William Walker Atkinson's actions by taking the pseudonym of an Indian man. Although his works did help make Eastern concepts like yoga and broadly interpreted Hinduism more digestible to a Western audience. William Walker Atkinson died in 1932 in Los Angeles, California, after successful careers in both writing and law, although now he is largely forgotten. I have found that his book Life Beyond Death correlates with Plato's theory of reincarnation in the Republic, and information I have found written in pamphlets by Manly P. Hall, as well as Demonic Reality by Patrick Harper. I encourage you to listen to this lesson with an open mind. So let's get started. We must start this lesson with the understanding of what death is and what the astral planes are. When it comes to death, the first thing to understand is that death is a transition from one plane of existence to another. Death is natural. It is the movement of transformation and awaits every mortal being. It is also a natural part of this plane. Everything must come to an end. Strictly speaking, from a broad Eastern standpoint, there is no such thing as death. There is nothing but life. Quote, life has many phases and forms, and some of those phases are called death by ignorant men. Nothing really dies, although everything experiences a change of form and activity. Your ego and personality are housed in this physical body or vehicle for a while. It's small representation of the greater version of you or your higher self. So when the body dies, the soul is brought through the transformational process from the earthly or material life into the astral life. We can unpack the many steps that this takes. During the process of death, which is a transition between two great planes, the six senses will grow dimmer, and the life of a person seems to be flickering out. However, the soul's psychic senses are growing. It's common for a dying person to see other spirits in the room with them. The last breath is when the soul leaves the physical body into its astral body. The dying person's astral body gradually disengages itself from its physical counterpart, and then the silver cord snaps and the astral body floats away, and the soul has now left behind the physical body. While in the astral body, the soul is plunged into a deep sleep while inside of the astral body. It is being prepared for a rebirth on the astral plane. The astral body is a protection for the soul during this time, just as the mother's womb during the 9 months before the first breath. During this soul slumber, the soul is adjusting itself to new conditions and to gain new strength and vigor required for this phase of existence in the astral. During soul slumber is also the great review of life, a panorama which passes before the mental version of the soul as it sinks into its soul slumber. The unconscious memories unfold their secrets. Nothing is reserved or withheld. The soul in its awakened spiritual state is able to connect to its highest self and able to know the meaning, cause, and consequences of every event in its life. The soul then gives itself judgment. It's able to analyze its life and pass judgment upon itself and its acts, according to the life lessons that were set out to be learned at the beginning of the former life. Quote, each man is his own absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself and the creator of his life, his reward, his punishment. The power within or divinity within oneself is your own conscience. The man is judged according to the highest standards of his soul, which generally represent the standards of his time and environment. There is no council of gods at the end of life to judge or be afraid of, only yourself. As a result of this process, the past life is concentrated and impressed upon the records of the soul, also in the Akashic record, and then the soul sinks into its deep soul slumber. During this time, lower nature principles such as desires, ambitions, likes, dislikes, attractions, and repulses will be prepared to be shed. These impulses are worn out on the astral plane, so the soul can be born into a new life. Remember that this is not an actual place. It's a condition or state of consciousness. This soul slumber is incredibly sacred, and it is incredibly guarded. For according to a Hindu maxim, not even the gods on their highest thrones have any power over the dominion of sleeping souls. The idea of rest after the stress and storm of life is natural and instinctive, which is why many of us say rest in peace. So how long does this astral body gestation period last? It truly depends on the soul's spiritual awareness. It varies depending on how the soul can discard the portions of its lower nature. This is the astral body breaking up parts of the personality. So when the soul awakens in the astral realm, it has reached its highest state of development possible. So a soul with low development will have little to shed away and will soon awaken on the lower astral plane. A soul of higher development will shed and discard sheath after sheath of the animal nature or lower principles until it can awaken to its highest attainment. Ordinarily, the soul sleeps in peace, undisturbed by outside influences. However, there are two things which tend to create an exception, which can be called dreams of the sleeping soul. 1. An intense desire, a feeling in the mind of the dying person, such as hate, love, or unfulfilled tasks or duties. 2. The strong desires and thoughts of those left behind, such as strong attachments, either to people, places, or things. Either or both of these things can cause a soul restlessness, and they have a tendency to attract the soul back to the scenes of earth. If this is the case, the soul will return to a state of somnambulism or sleepwalking. This is very regrettable, as it disturbs the soul's natural evolution. Most earth-bound souls will become tired and sink back into the slumber which they were disrupted from. And higher beings and blessed souls also will help lead souls back to their slumber. A soul who has died a natural death will sink into soul slumber very quickly. However, those who die by accident or are killed, or in other words, pass out of the body unexpectedly, will find themselves awake and in full possession of their mental faculties for some time. And in some cases, they're not aware that they have died. These poor souls can hear and see all that is going on around them by means of their astral senses, but they cannot realize that they have passed out of the physical body. This is when it's time for the astral helpers, the blessed souls, angels, or other beings from higher realms or states of consciousness, to gather around these souls and help them understand their condition and help them sink back into the soul slumber. So what happens after the soul awakens on the astral plane? The soul will be on a plane or subplane of the astral and determined by their level of consciousness. There are many realms and subrealms to the astral plane. Astral means of or pertaining to the stars, which originally came into the use of occultism by the idea that the other side was up in the skies or among the region of the stars. This is very terrestrial thinking. Most Westerners tend to think that heaven or hell is a specific place situated in space. However, the advanced occultists will know this is not true. Heaven is a state, or rather is a state of being. This can be very abstract to understand, but let's try making it as simple as possible. An astral plane is a state of consciousness. It is a vibration. In other words, a plane is a condition or state of activity in the internal energy of spirit in which the cosmos lives and moves and has its being. This can be illustrated through the vibration of sound. The air may be filled with many notes of a musical scale, but we cannot see them. Yet they occupy the same space and do not conflict with each other. Another example of this planes of existence can be seen on a color scale. Vibratory waves come from each color, giving it its own place on a scale, creating a spectrum. However, beyond the realm of visible light to the human eye, there are many colors invisible, because the vibrations are either too high or too low for the human mind to conceive. And this is the same with the astral planes. The teaching that comes from this is that each plane represents a different degree of vibratory energy. So in conclusion, the concept of astral planes has nothing to do whatsoever with the concept of space. When we use the terms realms, higher or lower, above or below, we are using them figuratively, as we are speaking at a rate of high vibration or a low rate of vibration. We can speak of these planes as rising from a lower plane to a higher plane, or descending from a higher plane to a lower plane. Don't think of these as stairs, think of them as waves of electricity when visualizing. There are no words to express the highest phenomena of high vibratory places, because they are above the ordinary human senses and beyond the power of ordinary words. However, the lower astral planes can be viewed through psychic activities such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, psychometry, and so on. However, on these lower planes, you may find ghosts, you may find apparitions of disembodied souls. For the most part, these lower astral planes are far from being healthy or even nice places to visit. Most of the time, mediums or psychics are interacting with this lower vibrational plane. We can talk more about the level of astral planes in the Zoom lesson. Let's continue with the soul's journey. The soul will naturally, impulsively reawaken itself, and this will happen slowly. Just as a butterfly discards the chrysalis shell, the soul will slip away from the astral body, creating an astral shell. The soul is free from all of these worn out encumbrances and now can open its eyes to new activities in the astral planes. Each soul is destined to dwell on a plane of the highest and best of itself, now that the lower elements have been discarded. Most people would call this heaven or hell, and it's important to understand that absolute justice has no place for punishment. However, the idea of heaven and hell are entertained by the individual and the remaining memories of their earth life and what they believed. Each soul finds himself surrounded by a religious environment in accordance to the best beliefs entertained during its earthly life. This is on the mental plane or the imagination. It is a reflection of the state of ideals and desires of the soul. So, for Native Americans who believe in the happy hunting grounds, that is where one's soul should find themselves after death. Whereas a Christian may find themselves walking the heaven, a street paved with gold and beautiful jeweled mansions. This means that one can undergo traditional tortures and sufferings through hell as well. Remember that this is all in the soul's imagination, of course. Until the soul receives a valuable disciplinary lesson, there are many degrees of the astral plane by which souls will find various shades of religious belief. The fire and brimstone is one extreme version of that. And the same goes for the idea of heaven. The soul finds itself enjoying bliss according to his own ideals. The plane of heaven and hell is the result of the soul's karma and judgment. Heaven and hell are purely a creation of the soul's own being. Now there is an exception. The soul which has advanced far enough to realize that there is truth in all religious beliefs and has manifested a tolerant spirit here on earth. This soul will be allowed to see the joys of all blessed in religious faith. Now there is no such thing as eternal bliss or eternal pain on the astral plane. Remember, it's all consciousness and vibration. But life on the astral plane does not consist entirely of heaven and hell. We'll talk about that later in the Zoom lesson. There are many opportunities for the soul to express its creative faculties and exercise intellect, joy, and knowledge. We have gone through half of the soul's journey, and it's a lot. The other half, part 2 of this lesson, will be focused on rebirth into the next life. In our Zoom lesson, we will be discussing so much regarding part 1, what life on the astral plane looks like, how ghosts are formed, and answering all of your questions to the best of my ability. This is a really exciting lesson, and it's a very interesting occult knowledge that I look forward to sharing with you. And until next time, Seekers, stay magical.
Wow.
Hey Mystics, welcome to our lesson on life after death and the astral planes. We're going to be working through this book, The Life Beyond Death by William Atkinson. I'm not going to try to pronounce his yogi name. If you haven't watched the first lesson, the pre-recorded lesson, I highly recommend, because I'm not going to be going over like a summary this time. We're going to be walking through what the soul does after it gets onto the astral plane. So we're going to do a quick recap and then head into the new content. So when the soul dies, the soul will leave the physical body and it goes into what is known as your astral body. The best way to think about this is thinking of an egg. The outer shell is your body. Then you have the white egg yolk, which is all of your energetic bodies. And then you have the yolk and the yolk sac. The yolk is your soul, and the sac is the astral body, which is protecting the soul as it leaves the physical plane. The most important aspect of the pre-recorded lesson is understanding that when we move beyond our physical bodies, we're not going to a place. There is no time in space that you are now moving to. It is a different vibration. We are all currently vibrating in our physical bodies at a very low level, because that's how we get matter. Matter comes from lower vibrations. So you move into the astral body, you go through the great review of life, which is where the soul becomes aware of every choice and every decision that was made, why it happened, what the lessons were to be learned. And then that gets impressed upon the soul and goes into the Akashic records, which is where the Akashic records is, again, not a physical place. It's a space within inside of yourself and a vibration. Then we go through the judgment period. So there is no great council of gods that are here to judge whether you go to heaven or hell. It is within yourself. It is your conscience that awakens. Your conscience is the God spark inside of you, the divine spark that awakens to a great extent in the astral and judges the soul's life on earth. From that point, the soul will then go into a level of the astral plane. Now, the astral plane has numerous amounts of layers. There's subplanes, there's major planes, nameless, so many that they can't even be named. But depending on where the soul is in its consciousness, it will then go. So let's say you have a person who hasn't had a lot of learning done in their life. Maybe they were of a lower vibrational person. They're only going to go up to here in the astral plane. And as you go higher, you're shedding more of the lower principles, the lower nature, the animal nature that made you human as the higher you go up. Somebody who has not done the spiritual work will still be at this low level. So they only shed a few things. They go through their soul slumber, they go through what will then become their reincarnation, and they go back down to earth. We're not going to talk about reincarnation in the Zoom lesson today. We're going to be talking a lot about how the astral functions and why the soul stays there. What is the purpose of going back into the astral? So I'm going to be reading from the book today. We're going to be starting on chapter 7, which is the soul's awakening. So, just like we come from our spirit self in the astral through the mother's womb for 9 months, you also go through a gestation period back into the astral. That is what your soul slumber is. During that time, your soul is preparing itself for life on the astral. It's a very different kind of life. And for the most part, it's a life that you make for yourself. Heaven or hell is going to be your awareness, your consciousness. So if you go through the great review of life and you go through judgment and you didn't learn your lessons, you didn't do a very good job in this lifetime becoming a better person, you're going to be on that lower level of the astral plane, which is like a hell. This could be that you're surrounded by people that you don't like. This could be that you're surrounded, if you are Christian, you could be in that fire and brimstone place. It's important to understand that there is no punishment in the grand scheme of God or of spirit. This is the soul punishing itself, knowing that it could have done better, and it goes through this place. It goes into the astral realm, which it feels it fits best. Because if you are think of wavelengths. If you're like this, you're not going to be able to go up higher where it's vibrating like this. So a lower soul cannot go higher. However, souls that are on higher planes can come down and visit and assist those on the sub or lower planes. The other thing about the astral that I think is misunderstood is that not all of the astral is good. The astral plane has its slums. So the lower you go, the dingier it kind of is. It's not all heaven. So in heaven, again, we're not talking about heaven as like the pearly white gates. It's this higher vibrational state of being. So what happens to these souls that get stuck for a little while on the sub lower planes of the astral? Well, some of these souls, because they're not very developed, actually go back to earth in their soul spirit state. And that's how we get ghosts. So, ghosts are earthbound spirits. They are spirits who were not able to release the principles, the lower nature of themselves. And this could be for a myriad of reasons. This could be because they feel like they have unfinished business. It could be because they didn't accomplish something in their life and they're so attached to it that they can't let go. Let's say the soul wanted to make $1 million, and because it died without doing that, it can't let go. It comes back. It's also important to understand that when the soul is supposed to go up higher, it lets go of something called its astral shell. So the astral body is just like the womb. So when the soul breaks free of it and goes up, the shell falls down into the lower astral plane. We talked about this with Manly P. Hall's pamphlet, Unseen Forces. So in the lower planes of existence, the lower astral plane, there are thousands of these astral shells just scattered around. And at any point, different kinds of spirits can actually pick up the shells and act as a ghost, can act as a spirit. Most of the time, spirits who are earthbound are in a state of something called somnambulism, which is also known as like a sleepwalking state. They get stuck here, whether or not they're in their astral shell. And then the souls who are up here at this higher vibration, they're called the blessed souls, come down and help pull the soul back up, away from the attachment of the material world. It's actually quite sad. Earthbound souls are it's a very sad experience because they're going against the natural evolution of the soul. They're not able to continue into their life path. So, um, so we talked about people who are unable to accomplish something. That's one reason. Um, Anxiety and remorse is another one, and then fear for those left behind. In particular, people who died untimely deaths often become earthbound souls unintentionally. So let's say someone died in a car accident. They were not expecting to die. Their body was not prepared for them to die. In that moment, the soul will actually think it's still alive on earth, but will not understand what's going on. Why can't people hear me? Why can't people talk to me? And then that's where, again, these earthbound souls need help in their spiritual development. They certainly don't want to stay in a place where they're brooding and feeling lost. Anything else about our earthbound souls? Oh, yes. So when you go to a seance or even any kind of medium, most souls who claim to be someone of fame are most likely not. It's very unlikely that you're actually talking to Benjamin Franklin or you're talking to Plato or Socrates. Those enlightened souls have far long been reincarnated and moved on. What's happening here is that these astral creatures, there are astral creatures that take those shells and pretend. They pretend to have this wisdom and knowledge, which these poor humans eagerly gobble up as wisdom. So, whenever you see or hear someone who claims to be a famous or historical character, it's incredibly unlikely that that is actually happening. So, ghosts are, like I think a lot of us have already thought, are a creation of regret. Ghosts are souls that are lost, that are not on their path of evolution. And thankfully, there are these blessed souls or higher beings, which many of us call angels, that come and assist these lower souls to move them forward in their life. So now we're going to start talking about what happens in the astral realm. So you've gone through the soul slumber, you've lost your astral shell. Now you're just a spirit and you're floating in the astral. What happens? What does life look like there? So the first thing to understand is time does not exist in the way that it does here on Earth. Time brings us from birth to death. In the astral plane, there's no such thing as birth or death. It just is. And that's really hard for our minds to comprehend. So when you study Plato, Plato talks about the astral realm in different language, but he's talking about the astral realm as a blueprint of ideas, ideals for humans. So an example would be, I have this book in front of me, right? But this book is only a copy of the perfect book that exists in the astral plane. So when you go into the astral plane, you are going to be inside of your imagination for a while. And imagination is key here. And this is where you start to see a mirage and product of thoughts. So all those thought forms, all those beliefs that you held when you were here on Earth are now going to be manifested in the astral plane. What this means is that you will experience heaven or hell as you believed it to be here on Earth. So for Native Americans, that might be the happy hunting grounds. For some people who are Christians, that might be looking at the gems and gold paths of heaven. Atkinson also does mention that because you're in your imagination, if you are in heaven and you find Jesus, That is not the actual Jesus. That is your imagination's projection of the Christ-like consciousness. Jesus is somewhere in a higher vibration, most likely. Remember, you are within your own imagination and your own astral state. So when you get into the astral plane, the soul has this beautiful ability to create. And why? Why is this so wonderful? Remember that creation is your godlike ability. And as you're creating, this is the part of self-expression. This is the ability to start really allowing your soul to show itself in its greatest expression. And it's hard for us to describe in words here on earth, but imagine all of the things that we see as beautiful in life. That's art, music, literature, invention, architecture. All of that is available to the soul to create for itself. It is, you're taking all of the beauty and opportunities. I'm trying really hard to explain. It's very difficult to explain. Everything that could be God is now available to you to create. Is everyone on the astral level created by the soul's vibration, imagination, and beliefs? Yes. And the question that you're going to follow up with is, can you have companionship? The answer is yes. We'll talk about that and just after we talk about the self-expression aspect of it. So in every aspiration, there dwells the certainty of its own fulfillment, meaning that the astral plane is a place for the soul to play, is a place for the seeds of your next life to be built. So let's say you want to become a great artist. The soul now has the opportunity to start studying, in a way, all the different forms of creation, all the different forms of art. And as you're doing this, the soul is now storing up astral energies to take back to earth. That's why we have talents. When you go into the astral plane after your death, you're gaining new abilities, you're gaining gifts, you're gaining genius, and you are storing them to bring them back down onto earth. So to answer your question, River, you are in your imagination within your super conscience. Most of the time in mystery school, we're talking about our sub or unconscious. The superconscious is like the larger aspect of the soul. Remember that you are only one small part of your soul here. You're a part of a much larger soul. Remember, we have all this oneness that it's hard for us to feel while we're here on earth. So the faculties of the mind, the soul practice, they become proficient in the tasks for their next earth life, as indicated by the pangs of achievement. So, what does that mean? The example that's given in the book is Einstein. So, Einstein came to Earth with an extraordinary amount of knowledge of the universe, understanding of physics and the mechanics of the laws of physics and how the material plane works. In this book, Atkinson describes it as his soul spent all of that time studying in the astral, building up all that energy to bring down with him. And unfortunately, that can lead to a lot of loneliness when you have that much energy built up, that you're not very interested in interacting with other people around you. So sometimes souls that gain all this energy come down and they forget that they have to still be a part of life. But all of this reasoning power and intellect actually will appear in life as intuition. So intuition has a lot of different meanings. From a psychological standpoint, it's your subconscious and your unconscious taking note of everything that's happening around you and making patterns. But in a spiritual sense, intuition is you gathering all of that spiritual energy from the astral plane and using it here on earth. Another example that Atkinson gives is Darwin. So Darwin came to Earth, and a lot of his scientific studies were hmm, were based on some intuition. Like, of course, he used science, but he used his intuition to study the nature of evolution in the Galapagos Islands. Nobody told him to do that. That had never been done before, but it was through his own findings and his own intuition that he was able to create the Darwin's theory. So the best way to think about this is the cause and effect. So a lot of people say, like, oh, you brought this from your past life. That's actually not true. You're bringing it from your astral life. When you go after death, you're shedding a lot of your lower natures. What you keep is the higher aspirations of the soul, the achievements of the soul in holiness and higher consciousness. That is what comes with you into the next life. Your love for cheese or your love for books most likely didn't come from your last life. The knowledge and intuition that you've gained in the astral plane is what you bring with you. Do you have any questions about astral self-expression at this point? No, excellent. So let's talk about astral companionship. This is chapter 14. There is no such thing as loneliness in the astral plane. Now, I know that's kind of hard for us to conceive of because you are in your own imagination, working at your own vibration and within your own belief system. But we are so lucky to know that there are souls, even the souls that you may not know here on earth, who are in your natural harmony. So when you will pass out of that imagination standpoint at some point when your soul has had enough of like bliss, right? So the example Atkinson gives is that when the Native American has hunted as much as he can hunt and feels fulfilled, the soul will then pass into another plane of existence. And that is where you will find others in soul harmony. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we understand ourselves as human as separateness. I have my own body, you have your own body. When you get up into these higher planes, it gets blurred. Your individual self does not exist. You are existing in conjunction with all of these other souls that are at the same level as you. So this is the cosmic consciousness. So I'm going to read directly from the book here. In the flashes of cosmic conscience, which occasionally comes to souls of spiritual enlightenment, there's included a realization of the association of souls on higher planes. And that's a connection of love. So that oneness of love. Are you fully within your super consciousness here? Yes. So I am no longer Ashley when I am up here. My soul does not have my ego. It does not have my personality anymore. I am my pure, raw soul connecting to other pure, raw souls vibrating at that same level. And that can seem very, very scary because I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to lose who I am. Remember that when you die, your personality is just part of that outer shell. It's just part of the egg whites. The soul, the yolk, is a small part of this super consciousness. That you are going to connect with many others, and others is in quotation here, because you're all part of that same fabric. You're all connected through love. And I know that that word love gets thrown around so much. What does that mean? Love is what is of the highest consciousness. And I'm going to read directly from the book here. To dwell in the same place as a loved one on the astral plane simply means to dwell in the same state, vibration, or condition of being, and thus brought into a closer relationship and degree of nearness. This can be pictured only faintly by reference of the soulful oneness that is experienced at time by lovers, when it seems as if limitations of the flesh have been transcended during the sexual act, as two souls have been blended into one. So, what Atkinson here is explaining is that at times, if you have ever had very spiritual, soulful sex, you actually feel like you want to be inside of the person, that you want to like rip their flesh apart so you can be closer to them. And if you can elevate the energy enough, you will feel this oneness where I don't know where my body begins and where that person's body begins or where it ends. There's this intertwined connectedness. Now imagine that with thousands of other souls. That is only a very small glimpse of what the higher astral planes look like. The soul, okay, so for let's say you have a loved one who isn't vibrating at this high level, can you visit them? The answer is yes, you can. The souls on higher planes feel sympathetic to the souls on the lower planes. And by establishing a psychic connection similar to a form of telepathy, between the two can thus render possible a experience of close mental and spiritual relationship and companionship. The soul on the higher plane may actually visit the soul being on a lower plane itself. There is no lonesomeness or loneliness for souls on the astral plane. There is nothing that is high and ennobling in earth life that is not magnified correspondence on the astral plane. So let's break that down a little bit. Everything is nature. So even though we think of nature as trees, the bees, the birds, nature is what ties all of these things together. It is what connects the atoms together and allows the world to manifest. Remember, everything here on the earthly plane is a reflection of what is above. As above, so below. So the souls, the higher you get up into the astral plane, you will then be more connected through love. And eventually, the highest that you can get is becoming one with spirit or God, whatever you want to call it. So even though let's say you have family members who don't ascribe to the same kind of occultism that you do. Maybe they ascribe to Buddhism or they ascribe to Christianity. When you die, you can still see them. Now, remember, they're not going to be mama or papa the way that you know them here on earth. They're going to be in their yoke selves, in their soul state. But it doesn't matter because you have connections. Remember, we've talked about cords in mystery school. These ethereal cords still exist in the astral plane. Now, the rotten ones and the bad ones will fall away as you are going into your evolution. Remember, we let go of our lower principles, but the positive ones, the meaningful ones, the spiritual ones will stay. And so that is how you can have astral companionship. So for a while, you are within your imagination. And then as the soul basically grows bored of this like perfect bliss in heaven, then they move again. So there are several layers to the life on the astral plane. Do we have any questions here? We're going through a lot, some very complicated stuff. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the last thing today is soul plane occupation. Whew. Yes, there are occupations on the astral plane for some souls, not all of them. It depends on the level of enlightenment that the soul has. So the highest form of souls, at least talked about in Atkinson's book, are called the blessed souls. We can imagine these souls being saints. We can imagine them being highly evolved human beings who have achieved the Christ-like consciousness. And just like here on earth, these souls have purpose, and that is to help elevate the lower souls, help give not just confidence to the lower souls, but help them understand their purpose, understand why they're at this level and how they can go up higher. In some cases, these blessed souls go down to earth and actually will pull the lost souls back into the astral plane, and then they go right back into soul slumber so they can go through that gestation period before arriving. So the astral plane occupation is chapter 8 in the book, and it says that this is where things get kind of funky. So everything that we're seeing here on our material world is a reflection of what's happening in the astral, as above, so below. Although we think that this is reality, and it is to some extent, it is not the highest reality. The highest reality is in the astral plane, where the soul can achieve higher activities. Now, it will be similar to that of the mind. So the mind invents things, it builds things, it creates things for material form. Somebody created this book, somebody created this iPhone. But the soul, it's actually going up to serve the higher planes. There is a purpose. So he calls it the scales of existence. Is it like astral Reiki? Can you further ask your question? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking there. And so the idea here is, again, that soul has the ability to create whatever it wants in the astral. And that's where we again go back to we're gathering all of this information. We're gathering new knowledge in order to store within ourselves for rebirth. So although there might not be physical manifestations like I'm in the astral plane and I want to write a book, I'm not going to have a physical book in the astral, but I will have energy that has been, think of it as like molded, that I have created for a greater purpose. Everything on the astral plane is towards a greater purpose. You're not working within your ego anymore. You're not working towards fame. You're not working towards money. You're working towards furthering humanity, and you're working towards furthering the evolution of souls. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that's something that it's also hard for us to really like digest. Like we're losing our personality, and then we're working towards the evolution of humanity. That's pretty high. Are blessed souls helping the lower souls raise their vibration like a person on earth helping raise the vibrations through Reiki? Yeah, it is like that. Yes, now I understand your question. So he doesn't go into a lot of detail here about what that means, other than the souls somehow raise the other souls. Now, it might be through, I'm assuming through energy work. I don't know. He doesn't give a lot of detail here, but that would be pretty cool. But it's really about helping, because the soul, you can't force a soul into evolution, unfortunately. They do have to make that choice. So a ghost can choose to stay on Earth as long as it wants to. And that's too bad, because it's devolving at that point. It's losing out on quite a lot because it's so attached to the material world. And it is through these blessed souls and the angels that we are able to work towards raising humanity. So that's a lot. You know, River told me that she was able to find this book as a PDF online for free. I highly recommend that you read it. There's so much here to gather. Just, you know, some awareness that some of the language in here is very antiquated. So you may find things that are not, they did not age well. But regardless, I think that this book is priceless. I think this book gives us a really good insight and makes death more understandable and more palatable, rather than we just go into the great beyond, we just go into the light and that's it. There is a process. So, one of the questions that I had when I was reading this book is, where did William Atkinson get all this information? There seems to be a lot of debate. So during the early 1900s, bringing over Eastern religions was a very big deal in the United States. And that started with Helena Blavatsky and Theosophy. And the idea here is that he did study under an Eastern teacher who may have been called, goodness, oh my goodness, Ramachakara. But we don't know. We don't know if that was it was actuality or not. However, Atkinson's books are still very popular today, and they're actually praised by modern Eastern practitioners for being accurate. So even though there's a lot of problematic issues with Atkinson and some of his language and the choice of taking on a name outside of his culture, the information is still accurate. And it is in the most condensed form that I have ever found. And my goal in this lesson is to help you have a greater understanding of what life on earth can be. So all of us come down with purpose. We all come down with that intuition inside of us, whether it is a personal goal, maybe you want to become the greatest painter of all time, or you come down as a higher vibrational soul to help move the evolution of humanity. We all now understand what is happening and why. So, in part two of our recorded lesson, we're going to go finish the rest of this book. It was just too much to put into one book, or one pre-recorded lesson. We're going to be talking about the second soul slumber and then the rebirth process and how that works. And then after we finish this book, we're going to start talking about soul contracts and how the soul decides what it's going to learn when it comes to Earth during its rebirth. So if you have any questions, please feel free to message me, send me an email, talk to me on the temple. I would be happy to answer them. This is a very abstract concept that we're talking about today. So thanks for listening.
Wow, that was amazing for a Pythian priesthood. And I ain't gonna lie though, I would love to like talk more about how this life and death and astral planes and all that because I know how my life has will been and I mean I'll talk more about it next time because there's a lot of things that I would love to discuss because I know there's a lot of things like she told me there's no such thing as loneliness or anything because I mean, I understand because I know I've been having like a very mental illness throughout for over years, and I understand. And when it comes from life, it's a lot of things happens, and yeah, and we'll talk more about it because I'll probably save a part two next time I'll save it up for next week when it's on Friday once again. So yeah. And also, I would love to talk to her, or she'll interview, or she'll talk to me on a podcast, and we'll probably do like a whole lot of collaborations throughout for like in videos, of course, because that might actually help me out, of course, because I hope that. Well, she's actually a nice person. She's really a nice person because it is how it is. So, yeah, but But yeah, man, we'll do more of this hopefully next time. But yeah, but comment down below what you think about it. Shout out to her for doing a very excellent good job, and hopefully we'll see each other near future. Hopefully for the collaboration. So yeah, but comment down below what y'all think about it, and I'll see you next video.